Thanks for joining us this morning, Andrew. Just wanted to have a little chat. This morning there was a article in the BBC News about a chap who's got a service charge. It's about £4,000 a year. The main thing was about Building Safety Act and all that sort of stuff, and then the high service charges and the rest of it. And I know, obviously your current role is office manager, but previously you've done the role of property manager. So some experience of setting budgets and the rest of it. And it can be problematic. I know from my own experience in past times gone by when I used to do all that. Everyone always wants really good value for money, and it can be quite hard, especially dealing with what I would describe as most blocks as quite domestic people, so they don't have that kind of commercial mindset always. So I don't know, just really open to discussion on that, really. And obviously we've had a lot of price increases and stuff. So
certainly, yeah, price increases from contractors and things, but also the changes post Grenfell on things like the fire door inspections. That if you're in a high rise block, the flat doors need to be inspected yearly, and the communal doors quarterly now, and that's it's all an expense, which essentially will go on the service charge. Also, insurance seems to be every year it goes up 10-15%, and there's nothing that we can do as block management company. We'll go and search for the best value, but of course, it's.
Ultimately, you have to have your building insured, because got to be insured. Any shortfall on that, whether it's uninsured or underinsured, is the liability of the freeholder or freehold company if it's a residence management. The government say like there's 10% inflation or something, say in 2021-22. But actually, like the real world cost of things is like a lot higher than that. Like I know, like timber, plaster, materials, all that sort of stuff, and the contractors. They're going in, and it was like £4 for a length of 2x4 wood, and then it was suddenly like £9. So that's far more than 10% inflation.
Absolutely. I mean, I know from a property that I was managing, we had the roof replaced, and in the time between the original quote and when we actually started the work, there was a considerable increase in the price of the OSB, the decking boards, which meant we had to take an additional collection to actually cover that cost. Just in that sort of year period it took between initially doing it and actually getting the work started.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? And the same's happened with labour rates and things like that as well, especially where the building industry was extremely busy after COVID, because a lot of people want to extend their properties and the rest of it. Then that drives demand. So it's a simple sale and, supply and demand situation where you had, like, I know from some of our contractors, even people that were just labourers or, assistants to the more skilled or professional qualified tradesmen, asking for like £200 a day, which was like more than a skilled person was on before the pandemic. Yeah. So
it's obvious when we commission work and they say, yes, I'm more than happy to do that for you in 6 weeks' time. Then you know that they've got a lot of work on, and companies with a lot of work on will,
they tend to supply and demand,
Absolutely.
isn't it? If there's a lot of supply and little demand, then prices are low, and around the other way, prices are high. But I've seen a lot of the service charges go up, like from my kind of overview and the rest of it, quite considerably. And we do own some property in some of those buildings as well. Some we own the freehold and the rest of it. So even from our point of view, we're not immune to it. We have to pay service charge on our properties, and they have gone up considerably. I mean, the one we were paying about maybe £1,100 before the pandemic. I think we're now paying about £2,600 or something.
I can believe that. Yeah. I mean, as a property manager, you try and keep all the costs to a minimum. We go out and we spend a lot of time looking for alternative energy suppliers. Energy has gone up crazy money recently. Looking for alternative energy suppliers and best value from the insurers and the builders, but our hands are tied essentially by the prices that we're being charged.
So do you have any sort of tips, I suppose, or like key things you would look for, maybe advice for other property managers or whatever when they're setting about their budget to look for value for money?
I'd say look for value for money is really that advice. don't plump for the first quote. I mean, particularly with energy prices, I think you use a reputable energy broker would be a good word of advice. If you can put a number of properties onto one energy broker, you can get considerably better value for money.
Like a bulk policy type
Absolutely,
thing.
yeah.
And then presumably, I mean, from my experience, it was always you might have a contractor that you've worked with for years and years and years. It does always pay to like double check their prices and the rest of it against the market.
Yes.
And there is something to be said for having good relationships with people, like the energy, for instance. I know we switched and did our clients all a big favour, but then it caused us a lot of issue because they were completely useless at the way they build.
Yes.
So you kind of have to do those two things, because ultimately someone has to then pay for that, because we either increase our management fee or we swallow the cost. So it is hard, but I would say definitely looking around was my thing. Making sure that the contractors you use, like the guy that tests the fire alarm, for instance, and the emergency lighting, rather than just like auto renew every time, maybe just test the market. They might still be the cheapest, or broadly speaking the same, or it makes little difference to the bottom line, but at least then you've done your due diligence.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that also sometimes when there's more than one thing to be done, trying to get things done in one visit rather than I mean, for example, when the fire alarm service is done, if your fire alarm company can offer that service, perhaps have them do a lighting check, make sure the emergency lighting and the normal lightings are all working. That way you're saving the block a visit.
Yeah, so make sure that they're kind of like being efficient with their time as well, or at least have the ability to be efficient as well.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, same with cleaner. Rather than sending another company in there to go and clear up the bins if the bin area is getting a bit messy. If you have a cleaner that's happy to do that, ask the cleaner to do that on a weekly basis. It'll save the £250 fee for having a rubbish clearance company go around and do it.
And I always found that people questioned the budget, but they didn't really have a comprehension of how it was really made up. So a cleaner is a classic example where they would turn up to the hallway. They might spend 45 minutes cleaning, and they call out the bill is like, I don't know, £45, £50, for instance. And then so people's opinions like, well, I could do that for £50. I'll work for £50 an hour as a cleaner, but they don't comprehend that includes the van, the cleaning equipment, the insurance, all the public liability, all those things that go along it, all the dead time in between. So if like you only cleaned 3 buildings in a day and earned £150, and it's cost you, I don't know, £65 in fuel and van insurance and the rest of it, you've only cleared whatever that is, £85. It's barely above minimum wage if you're doing like a 7-hour day. And I think people get a bit confused with that as well.
They absolutely do. I mean, the prime time to try and explain that is at the AGM, assuming you get more than a couple of people turn up, to actually sit there and explain that although you might look at something like the gardening costs, another prime example, and you might think, well, it's what's he doing for his money? But he's running a business as well as everybody else. He's not there. He's not just, chap that Charlie on the end who likes to potter around in the garden. Yeah. No, he's actually making a living, and he's got employees and tax and insurance and all those things to pay. Yeah. So, those costs, And
it is possible for the residents to do the cleaning and the gardening if they want to, because they often, assuming they own their own freehold and they're in control of this decision, but they can use their own public liability policy to do that.
Absolutely.
But they are responsible for their own health and safety, damage, all that kind of stuff. So if someone slips over on the floor or whatever, that someone does have the right to make a claim on the policy. In my experience, when those have run, I don't know about yourself, Andrew, but it starts off really good, but then it ends up one person who is doing it all because they're either a king gardener or they're just sick of the fact that anyone's only hoovering their own landing.
Indeed.
And then eventually it all falls apart anyway.
Yeah, so that's happened on a couple of occasions where somebody has said, yes, I'd love to do it, and they do it for 6-9 months, and then you get a phone call saying
hasn't been done for ages.
Yeah, the cleaning looks rubbish.
Yeah.
You know, and you find out that the lady at flat 14 is no longer happy to do it and has stopped and didn't tell
bother
us.
saying anything. Yeah.
So we've now
And
got
also,
to find somebody else.
You've got to submit proper invoicing and stuff like that. You can't just be, here's a pay my money into my bank account. You need to invoice, and then if you a taxpayer, you need to submit a return and do a tax on that as well. If you're
that's one of those things that I think a lot of people, we say, without mentioning specifics, we had exactly that. The lady had previously gone and knocked on the director's door, and the director had paid her cash in hand. When we took that block on to manage, we had to formalise that with her and say, you are aware that you need to have the appropriate insurances in place, and she very soon
didn't want to do it anymore.
No, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, because it is complicated. So.
It is,
absolutely. But I think that's good. So you've got, obviously, it's inevitable. This article here, obviously, I feel sorry for the chap because he feels a bit trapped in his flat because no one wants to buy it, or maybe have trouble selling it because the service charge is £4,000, which does, to be fair, on the face of it, seem a little high.
It does, unless it's something like a penthouse apartment or something like that.
I mean, I think it's a pretty standard apartment in a high-rise building of some nature. But in that sense, there are remedial repairs to be done that aren't covered by all the government schemes and the rest of it. Sure. If there's a lot of high usage in the building, they're trying to build a reserve fund for a future date. There are many things. So I think the key tip is to keep an open line of communication with your agent. Absolutely. If they're not communicating to them, you do have all the tribunals. We've gone to many courts to argue with reasonableness of expenditure and all that sort of stuff. The best thing to do is to pay your bill and then argue for the reasonableness.
Yes, a lot of people will try and say it's too much money, I won't pay. Yeah. If you do that, all you're going to do is end up with a day in court for a different reason.
Yeah, you will end up with administration fees and charges, and then at the end of the day, if they deem that it's reasonable, you'll have to pay all of that. So
it's far better to pay it up front.
Better to pay up front and then challenge the reasonableness of a service charge. But also have an understanding that costs have risen, things have gone up in price, and for the property managers, good tips, search around, don't just renew on the contracts, and make sure you explain to people that, the cleaner might be on £50 an hour, but there is complications.
Communications is key. If your service charge is very high and you feel it's very high, if you have a good managing agent, they'll explain. They'll be quite happy to explain to you why the charges are why they are what they are. Yeah. And if they don't, then you have a very good reason to go and talk to a tribunal about it.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Pleasure.
Cheers.